This show is listener supported. You can join us and help our show grow to support more adoptees by going to adopteeson.com/partner. You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is episode 160. I'm your host, Haley Radke, and this is a special episode where we are going to spend our time together acknowledging Adoptee Remembrance Day. I invited members of our adoptee community to share some recordings with us of their ways of memorializing adoptees who we have lost, their thoughts on Adoptee Remembrance Day, why it's so important for others to acknowledge adoptee loss and disenfranchised grief. And so that's what you'll hear today is a collection of recordings from fellow adoptees. We are also going to have a minute of silence to acknowledge those we've lost and to think about adoptees who perhaps are without citizenship, who have struggled with abuse at the hands of people who were supposed to take care of them, adoptees who have struggled with addictions or been incarcerated. We shared about that last week on the show with Pamela Karanova, who is the creator of Adoptee Remembrance Day, as well as the amazing organization Adoptees Connect that has support groups for adoptees all around the world. I also want to give a warning. We are going to mention suicide at multiple points in this episode, and I will be including links to suicide hotlines and other places you can seek support in the show notes. Let's listen in.
Excerpts from a teenage adoptee's journal. I don't want to go on living. I want to just give up. Yet I know if I do, I'll regret it later. I'm only 14, and yet I feel like I've already gone through the hurt of a lifetime. I'm beginning to seriously think that I don't belong in this family. Half the time it's like I'm not here anyway. They're better off without me. They don't need me. That's obvious. Why do mom and dad hate me? Why do they treat me this way? I just don't understand what I've done to deserve this. Why don't they just send me away? They hate me anyway. Why else would they treat me like this? Why? Why did they adopt me? Why, if they were just going to treat me this way? All I want is to feel loved. I have never heard anyone in this family tell me they love me. I might as well just die right now. It's not like anyone would care. I just need someone to talk to, and no one wants to listen. No one wants to hear. It'll only make them feel bad, and that would be out of their comfort zone. No one cares if I die anyway. They'd be glad they were rid of me. Why can't I just die?
I'm Colleen. I'm an adoptee. I very recently came out of the fog. Out of a fog I never knew existed, let alone a fog I was living in. I have been in and out of reunion for over 30 years, more than half of my life. I have never truly allowed myself to feel the emotions surrounding all of it, the good and the bad. I have adjusted my feelings around being adopted to what I thought society viewed as acceptable. I didn't know until now that I have been struggling to just feel and to be myself. I have made myself fit to be the good adoptee, to avoid conflict, avoid offending anyone, and to accommodate everyone's feelings at the expense of my own. I have let my insecurity and fear of rejection navigate this. I now feel I can breathe. I can finally start to learn to be me. I now know I have experienced trauma. I have experienced a grief and loss I didn't know was there. I am strong. I am resilient. I am compassionate and empathetic. I am intuitive. I am an adoptee. And on Adoptee Remembrance Day, we honor those of us we have lost, those of us who continue to struggle, those of us who have become leaders and advocates. Today we honor each of us and our truth.
This Adoptee Remembrance Day, I'll be thinking of my birth mother, and she was an international adoptee and completed suicide at 25 years old. So I'm really glad that in the community, Adoptee Remembrance Day is something that's getting started, and hope it will really take hold so we can shed light on these things.
I wish that people truly understood that adoption isn't the cure for infertility, but I don't believe they really do. Adoptive parents really want a blank slate where they can create the perfect child who never was. Our biology is written on that slate, and as it emerges, we are viewed as misfits, disappointments, monsters even. And that gets internalized, and we carry that forever.
Hello, this is Janet Nordine. For Adoptee Remembrance Day, I would like to speak about my sister, Sarah. Sarah was the 8th child and 2nd girl born to our birth mother. She was also placed for adoption at birth, like me. She grew up in Texas and was a Texas girl through and through. She loved animals, great food, and watching award shows just like me. She was a bright light in many people's lives. She shared her love of her children with me and how proud she was to see them grow into adults. She was also a birth mother and told me of her love for the child she lost. She and I found each other in February 2017. We had an immediate bond and loved our talks and laughing together. Sarah died suddenly and very unexpectedly only 30 days after I found her. I am still so heartbroken from losing her. On this day of remembrance of adoptees lost, I remember Sarah, today and always with my whole heart full of love.
My name is Julian, and I was relinquished and adopted twice. I was first adopted as an infant after 2 months in foster care. Several years later, those parents divorced. Several years after that, when I was 9, my adoptive mother dissolved the adoptions of both me and my adoptive sister, and together we were placed with a second adoptive family. It's tragic enough that so many of us adoptees had our identities and our past relationships erased as infants through closed adoptions. But it's absolutely outrageous that my sister and I were made to experience this erasure a second time at the ages of 5 and 9. Our middle and last names were changed, our new adopters were listed on our birth certificates, and most tragically, none of our previous adoptive family could legally make contact with us until we each turned 18. For all intents and purposes, our previous lives disappeared without a trace, even though we were living a mere 7 miles from our previous home, and only 4 miles from those we'd known as aunt, uncle, and cousins. Now, I don't know how differently a similar situation would be handled today, but I think my experience of living through 2 closed adoptions is an extreme example of how far the system was willing to bend to meet the needs and preferences of adopters, even to the very clear detriment of the needs of children.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I'm a kinship adoptee. My brother and I were taken in by my paternal grandparents when I was 3 and he was 2, in an effort to avoid the foster system in North Carolina after our mother abandoned us at our uncle's house. We were adopted about 2 years later. While we genuinely couldn't have asked for a better, more loving childhood in our adoptive home, we still couldn't escape the trauma we experienced. I was old enough to recognize that our new situation was better and safer than our old one, but my little brother hadn't experienced the same level of abuse with our first family, and his attachment to our mother was strong. So the transition and loss of her affected him much more profoundly. Even at 3 years old, I would comfort him and reassure him that we were safe and loved when he would cry for his mommy. He was diagnosed with ADHD and medicated at a young age, which we now know may not have been ADHD at all, but the manifestation of trauma and grief. By the time we were in high school, he was drinking regularly and acting out in ways that my parents didn't know how to handle. He was 15 when he was arrested while intoxicated and carrying a knife, and was sent to a boys' rehabilitation home out of state for a year. His early adulthood found him living the life of a drifter. He had no roots, no sense of family except for me, and no direction. He continued to use drugs and alcohol to dull his pain. He experienced the temporary loss of his life after being hit by a car on a highway, the permanent loss of his children because of his and his wife's drug use, and the loss of his freedom after a drug charge. My brother is 31 now, and he's slowly picking up the pieces of his broken life. He's stopped drinking to excess, he's found stable housing, and he's started his own business. I have yet to discuss with him that the root of his lifelong struggles stems from our adoption trauma, but I have no doubts. What I want to share with listeners is that even in the best possible circumstances where children are removed from an abusive home and placed with loving and capable family members, love is not enough to overcome early childhood and adoption trauma. We must not end our efforts with family preservation. We must also advocate for counseling and trauma therapy for everyone involved.
Hi, this is Kirk, and I wanted to take the opportunity to honor two people that had a big impact on my childhood, who have perhaps never been acknowledged this way. As an adoptee myself, I know what it's like to live with thoughts of suicide, and I've known 3 people in my life who've taken the step to leave us, and 2 of them were adopted. So this message is for you guys. Patrick, you were like an older brother to me. I was 12 when you died, almost 25 years ago, and you forever changed my life. I miss going trick-or-treating with you and playing video games and having water balloon fights and, of course, going on ski trips. Those were some of the best memories of my childhood. And nothing has ever been able to replace those experiences with you in them. And Jared, you were a great classmate. I thought you were as cool as shit. And I remember your big smile in the 6th grade yearbook, and you looked happy and handsome. And I just want you to know that you were special and worthy of love and deeply missed. Like I said, I don't know if anyone has ever recognized how adoption might have shaped you, and I just wanted to honor that part of your identity and your personhood, and just let people know that adoption has a real impact on us.
My name is Laura. I live in Scotland, and this Adoptee Remembrance Day, I would like to pause and hold a thought for my fellow adoptees who are no longer with us, for the Hart children who were murdered, for those who have died by suicide. I'd like to remember them and hope that eyes will be opened and minds might change about what it means to be adopted, about how it feels to be adopted, and about the loss and the grief surrounding it. I'm 30 years old. I'm an adoptee, about 2 years out of the fog, and beginning to heal. Lots of love.
Hey Haley, this is Lee Bailey. My childhood friend Paul, a fellow adoptee, took his life this past April. At his funeral, the preacher closed with these words: "May Paul's unfulfilled life inspire us to seek out every opportunity to be purveyors of grace to all around us." And Haley, I pray that grace comes in the form of our stories and education and paves the way for a brighter and more fulfilled future for adoptees. Thank you.
Hi, Haley. This is Liz DeBetta. I'm so excited to share a little bit of my writing with you for Adoptee Remembrance Day 2020. This is a short excerpt from my one-woman show called Unmothered, a story of adoption and patriarchy. I'm sorry for my trauma. It's not my fault. It happened before I could remember it. I carry it in 3 pockets in my soul. It grew as I grew. 1 pocket wasn't enough. I'd like to crack myself open and empty those pockets for good, loose their contents into the universe to be taken up by the 4 winds, carried away to nothingness, so I can be lighter, so I can feel free, so I can be unburdened enough to let you in. I'm trying to remember not everything is a fight. But I was born fighting. It's what I know. It's what I do. It's how I am. It's what I've needed to stay sane, to keep control, to find some convoluted peace in the chaos of my soul. There is physical pain and there is psychic pain. Sometimes they become intertwined and it's hard to know which started first. At some point that becomes irrelevant because either way, the end result is pain. Constant, persistent pain that becomes the foundation of existence. I have been in pain my whole life. For a long time, I didn't know it, or I did a great job of ignoring it. It's easier to deal with pain if you can pretend it's not there. If you can attribute it to something else, don't acknowledge it. Sweep it under the rug, shove it in the back of a closet, lock it away until you can't anymore. I can't anymore. I shouldn't have to. I've always been the compliant adoptee, the competent child, the entertaining child, the smart, articulate, pretty, witty child. That child has grown up. That child is trying to move on. But that child still hurts. I still hurt. And it's not because you didn't love me enough. It's not because I didn't feel safe or secure outwardly. It's because I have never felt safe in myself. And I never had words to express that. And I needed to. I need to say that being adopted is confusing. I am confused by everything about the circumstances of my life. And there's so much I haven't been able to say for so long. So much I have kept buried inside. So much I'm still afraid to say.
Telling adopted people that not all adoptions are bad is like telling somebody not all road traffic accidents end in death. The fact is, something horrible has happened at the beginning, and we wouldn't have been available for adoption if it hadn't. Society choosing to ignore this difficulty at the beginning only makes our search for healing and understanding that much harder.
Please join me as we pause for a moment of silence. As I write, I'm already tearing up. That's very like me. I'm a crier and I naturally feel big feelings. I've struggled with depression and suicidal ideation on and off since I was 10. I made my first suicide plan when I was 12. What's bringing emotions to the surface for me now, though, isn't thinking of my younger self. It's thinking of those we've lost. I host the podcast Adoptees On that is all about giving a literal voice to the voiceless. I can't count the number of times adoptees have shared with me, on mic and also after we stop recording, the pain they've experienced has led them to consider suicide and even attempt suicide. Whose stories have I missed hearing? Whose voices have been cut short too soon? Thinking of the shock in finding that the citizenship their parents must certainly have finalized for them was a phantom promise as they sit on the plane back to their country of origin. No money, no language, no one waiting at the airport. Thinking of the children who were promised their forever home, only to find out it's at the bottom of an ocean. Thinking of the perfect two-parent household with the six-figure salaries who abused their adopted child to the point they could only find one way to run away forever. Thinking of the adult who's finally expressed their true feelings of loss to their adoptive parents and now finds themselves disowned and alone. You know these stories are about real human beings, real fleshly bodies with freckles on their nose, more than cheeks, and those pudgy rolls that can't quite squeeze over the top of that pair of jeans anymore, and the tattoo that was that cringy dolphin, but it's so faded now, and the teeny little fingers who still can't zip up their jacket by themselves, and the few hairs that aren't coming in quite the same color anymore, and the stretch marks on that one weird spot on their left thigh, and those feet where the right one is always just a bit bigger, and sizing up a pair seems silly, and the scent of that perfume that you remember from when everyone was wearing it in high school, and their hands always felt so cold, but they never wanted gloves, and the little scar on the forehead that made it welcome Harry Potter jokes, and those eyes that just seemed to be an indescribable color, maybe hazel, and that fingernail that always grew back, a teeny bit crooked after that accident, and the teeth that could have used a quick check in the mirror after the salad, and the voice that sounded just like I can't summon up their voice anymore. It won't come to me. As we remember those we've lost, take the breath, take the pause, and by all means grieve. But as we rise the next day, may their memory encourage our adoptee revolution. I want to thank all those of you who shared your thoughts with us. We are thinking of those you are honoring today with Adoptee Remembrance Day. Many of the voices you heard are supporters of the podcast, some for years, who have signed up on Patreon. And so I thank you for your voice and for your contribution to helping adoptee voices be heard around the world. I thank you so much for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.